The frantic voice on the emergency line at 8:47 p.m. was barely recognizable as belonging to Sheikh Rami Al-Mansouri, a man known throughout Al-Karama for his composed demeanor. "Please, send ambulance immediately. There's been a terrible accident in the kitchen," he gasped into the phone, his words punctuated by panicked breathing. In the background, neighbors would later testify. They could hear a woman's voice repeating the same phrase over and over. "It was an accident. It was an accident." By dawn, investigators would discover that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. When Dubai police arrived at the modest two-story villa in Al-Karama just 12 minutes later, they found a scene that would haunt veteran officers for years to come. Rosa Santos, a 28-year-old Filipina domestic worker, lay motionless on the kitchen's white ceramic tiles, crimson pooling beneath her still form. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the lingering aroma of cardamom tea and tonight's dinner preparations, creating an atmosphere of domesticity interrupted by violence. Overturned chairs and scattered cooking utensils suggested a struggle, while a single kitchen knife lay abandoned near the sink, its blade catching the harsh fluorescent light. But this story didn't begin with that emergency call on March 14, 2016. It started 25 years earlier, with an arranged marriage that seemed destined for happiness and a woman who would spend decades building the perfect facade, only to watch it crumble in the most devastating way imaginable. Leena Al-Mansouri had been born in 1969 to a modest Dubai merchant family whose textile trading business had survived the Emirates' dramatic transformation from pearl-diving port to gleaming metropolis. Growing up in old Dubai's winding streets, she learned early that reputation was everything in their tight-knit community. Her childhood was filled with the gentle rhythms of traditional life. Women gathering for afternoon tea, speaking in hushed Arabic while children played in courtyards, and the understanding that marriage would be her pathway to security and respect. At 22, Leena's wedding to Sheikh Rami Al-Mansouri represented everything her family had hoped for. Though Rami belonged to a minor branch of the ruling family, his title carried weight in their Al-Karama neighborhood. The 1991 ceremony was modest by royal standards but elegant enough to warrant mention in local newspapers' social pages. What began as a traditional arrangement gradually developed into mutual respect and, if not passionate love, then comfortable partnership. By 2016, Leena had successfully crafted herself into the epitome of the respectable middle-class Emirati wife. At 47, she served on the local women's committee, organized charity drives for struggling families, and volunteered at the community center teaching traditional crafts to younger women. Their villa, purchased during Dubai's steady economic growth, became renowned for its warm hospitality. Weekend gatherings filled their sitting room with extended family and neighbors sharing meals, discussing community affairs, and maintaining the social bonds that held their world together. Sheikh Rami, now 54, commanded similar respect among the neighborhood's men. His government clerk position provided steady income, while his small import business dealing with textile suppliers in India and Pakistan had grown modestly successful over 2 decades. With assets worth approximately AED 2 million spread across properties and investments, the Al-Mansouri family occupied a comfortable position within Dubai's expanding middle class, neither wealthy nor struggling, but respectably established. Yet beneath this carefully polished surface lay a source of quiet anguish that had shadowed their marriage for years. Despite bearing 3 intelligent, beautiful daughters, Leena had never provided Rami with the son he desperately wanted to carry the family name forward. Maryam, 24, had graduated with a teaching degree and worked in Dubai's public schools. Layla, 22, pursued business studies in Sharjah with modern ambitions that sometimes worried her traditional parents. Aisha, 20, possessed an artistic temperament and still lived at home, serving as the family's emotional barometer. Rami genuinely loved his daughters, but traditional expectations ran deeper than personal affection. Extended family gatherings invariably included subtle comments from elderly relatives about the need for someone to carry the family name. These words, spoken with knowing glances and gentle sighs, cut deeper with each repetition. In quiet moments, Leena caught Rami watching other men's sons with unmistakable longing, and she understood that her greatest failure as a wife wasn't anything she had done, but what she had been unable to provide. It was into this complex emotional landscape that Rosa Santos entered in January 2016. Hired through a reputable domestic staffing agency, Rosa brought excellent references from her previous employment with a Filipino-Canadian family in Sharjah. A high school graduate from Cebu, she had come to Dubai with dreams shared by thousands of her compatriots. Earning enough money to transform her family's circumstances back home. Her parents' small farm struggled with mounting debts, and her younger sister's college education depended entirely on Rosa's monthly remittances. Rosa moved into the small room in the villa's ground floor rear section, sharing bathroom facilities and having access to the kitchen for her daily duties. Initially, everything seemed perfect. Rosa was respectful, hardworking, and gradually became a trusted household member. She learned basic Arabic phrases, understood the family's routines, and navigated the cultural expectations with remarkable grace. But by February 2016, subtle changes began emerging that would ultimately lead to that blood-soaked kitchen floor and Rami's panicked emergency call. Changes that a woman with 25 years of marriage experience would inevitably notice, and that would transform a carefully maintained family harmony into jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately murder. The first signs of trouble had actually begun years before Rosa Santos ever set foot in the Al-Mansouri household. Leena possessed the kind of intuitive awareness that develops after 25 years of marriage, the ability to detect subtle shifts in her husband's behavior, changes so minute that others might dismiss them as imagination. But Leena had learned to trust these instincts, because they had never failed her before. In 2003, there had been Siti, the Indonesian maid whose shy demeanor had gradually transformed into confident familiarity around Rami. The affair lasted barely 2 months before Leena quietly dismissed her after the local festival, providing generous severance and ensuring the woman found employment with a family in Abu Dhabi. No drama, no confrontation, just the swift, efficient removal of temptation. 5 years later, it was Priya, the Sri Lankan cleaner whose inappropriate relationship with Rami required family intervention. Leena's sister Amira had helped orchestrate that resolution, with elderly relatives speaking sternly to Rami about proper boundaries and respectful behavior. Again, the situation was handled with traditional discretion, the woman relocated through family connections, and the incident never mentioned again. By 2012, there were mere suspicions about Rami's involvement with their neighbor's Ethiopian housekeeper, stolen glances, extended conversations during community gatherings, unexplained absences. Nothing concrete enough to act upon, but sufficient to keep Leena's maternal radar permanently activated. Each incident had followed a disturbing pattern that Leena only recognized in retrospect. The affairs always coincided with periods of heightened family stress about their lack of a male heir. After community weddings where newborn boys were celebrated, during visits from Rami's elderly mother who would sigh meaningfully while watching neighbors' sons, or following conversations with business associates who proudly discussed their sons joining family enterprises. Leena had developed sophisticated coping mechanisms over the years. She threw herself into community activities, organized elaborate celebrations for her daughter's achievements, and maintained the kind of social calendar that left little time for brooding. When Miriam graduated with her teaching degree, Leena hosted a gathering that had the entire neighborhood praising her daughter's accomplishments. When Layla received acceptance to university in Sharjah, another celebration reinforced the family's pride in their children's success. But Rosa Santos represented something different, something more dangerous than the previous domestic workers who had caught Rami's attention. Where Siti had been timid and Priya deferential, Rosa possessed an unmistakable confidence that grew stronger each week. She asked questions about Dubai's history, expressed opinions about current events, and engaged in conversations that went far beyond the usual employer-employee exchanges. Rosa's economic situation made her both vulnerable and determined. Earning AED 1,200 monthly, she faithfully sent AED 800 home to her parents' struggling farm in Cebu, living on the remaining AED 400 with the frugality of someone who understood genuine hardship. Her small room in the villa's rear section contained only essentials: a narrow bed, modest clothing, a laptop for weekly video calls with family, and a growing collection of Arabic language books that revealed her serious intentions about cultural integration. Unlike previous domestic workers who maintained careful distance from family affairs, Rosa gradually began inserting herself into household discussions. She offered suggestions about meal planning, commented on news programs playing in the sitting room, and even shared stories about her university education in the Philippines. This wasn't the behavior of a temporary employee planning to return home after 2 years. This was someone positioning herself for permanent integration. Leena's growing awareness manifested in sleepless nights spent analyzing every interaction she witnessed between Rosa and Rami. The way Rosa's eyes lit up when Rami entered the kitchen. How she found excuses to linger when serving his meals. The subtle changes in her posture and voice when addressing him compared to how she spoke with Leena or the daughters. More troubling were the financial anomalies Leena discovered through her meticulous household management. Unexplained cash withdrawals from their joint account. Receipts for jewelry purchases from the gold souk that never appeared as gifts for family members, and restaurant charges for meals at establishments Leena had never visited. When questioned, Rami's explanations became increasingly vague: business expenses, gifts for business associates' wives, meetings with potential investment partners. Simi, their artistic 20-year-old daughter still living at home, became Leena's unintentional ally in monitoring the household's emotional temperature. With the sensitivity of a natural artist, Simi noticed things others missed. The way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, the tension that followed certain glances between her parents, and Rosa's gradual transformation from respectful employee to confident household member. "Mama, is everything all right with Rosa?" Simi asked one evening in February, her dark eyes reflecting genuine concern. "She seems different lately, more comfortable, but also more nervous, if that makes sense." It made perfect sense to Leena, who had been cataloging similar observations for weeks. Rosa's behavior contained contradictions that suggested internal conflict, growing confidence in her interactions with Rami, but increasing anxiety around Leena and the daughters. Someone who believed her position was becoming more secure, while simultaneously fearing discovery. The breaking point approached with inevitable momentum. By early March 2016, Leena's careful observation had accumulated enough evidence to confirm her worst suspicions, but not enough to confront the situation directly. She needed absolute certainty before risking the family's reputation and her daughter's futures on accusations that could destroy them all if proven wrong. What she discovered next would make her wish she had acted on suspicions alone. March 10, 2016, began like countless other Thursday afternoons in the Al-Mansouri household. The villa settled into its familiar rhythm of post-lunch quietude, with Dubai's blazing sun encouraging the traditional siesta period that even modern families still observed. Rami had retreated to his study to review import documents. Simi was at college attending afternoon classes, and Rosa moved quietly through the house completing her daily tasks with the efficiency that had made her such a valued household member. Leena had left for her weekly women's committee meeting at the community center, where she and a dozen other neighborhood wives planned charity events and discussed local concerns over cups of cardamom tea and plates of mamul cookies. But today's meeting ended earlier than expected when the guest speaker canceled, and Leena found herself returning home at 3:30 p.m. instead of her usual 5 p.m. arrival. The front door opened silently on well-oiled hinges, and Leena paused in the marble-tiled foyer, instinctively listening to the sounds of her household. What she heard made her blood freeze in her veins. From the sitting room came the sound of intimate laughter, not the polite chuckling of employer and employee, but the warm, private amusement shared between lovers. Moving with the stealth that only betrayed wives possess, Leena approached the sitting room doorway and peered through the slight gap where the door stood ajar. The scene before her confirmed her worst suspicions and shattered her carefully maintained composure in a single devastating moment. Rosa sat beside Rami on the cream-colored sofa, not in the respectful distance appropriate for domestic staff, but close enough that their bodies touched with casual intimacy. Rami's hand rested on Rosa's shoulder while she leaned into him, speaking in hushed, excited tones about plans and possibilities. But it was Rosa's next words that hit Leena like a physical blow. The young woman was pregnant, 3 months along. She whispered to Rami with tears of joy streaming down her face. The baby was healthy, growing perfectly, and Rami's reaction was an expression of pure, unadulterated joy that Leena had never seen directed at her in 25 years of marriage. 25 years of trying to conceive the son Rami desperately wanted, of enduring painful fertility treatments, of watching his face fall each month when hope transformed into disappointment. And now this young woman, this employee who had been in their home for barely 2 months, was carrying the child that would complete Rami's dreams. Leena retreated from the doorway on unsteady legs, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she had witnessed. This wasn't just an affair. Affairs could be managed, contained, resolved through traditional family intervention. This was replacement. Rosa wasn't seeking temporary comfort or financial benefit. She was positioning herself as the wife who could give Rami what Leena never could. That evening, after Simi left for her university study group, Leena orchestrated what she intended as a civilized discussion about proper boundaries and acceptable behavior. She called Rosa into the sitting room where Rami waited, his expression already defensive. The traditional Arabic coffee service sat untouched on the carved wooden table as Leena began what she hoped would be a reasonable conversation about respect, family honor, and appropriate conduct. But Rosa, emboldened by pregnancy and Rami's obvious affection, refused to play the role of submissive domestic worker any longer. She spoke of love, of carrying Rami's child, of how everything had changed now that she was expecting. The casual confidence in her voice, the way she used Rami's first name without traditional honorifics, struck Leena like repeated slaps across the face. What followed were 48 hours of psychological torture as Leena grappled with options that ranged from impossible to unthinkable. Divorce would mean social death, financial ruin, and the destruction of her daughter's marriage prospects. Acceptance would mean watching Rosa gradually assume the role of primary wife, the mother of Rami's heir, the woman who succeeded where Leena had failed. She consulted with her sister Emirati, who urged immediate action. She spoke with elderly aunts who shook their heads sadly and murmured about the changing times. She sought guidance from trusted women friends who offered sympathy but no solutions. Every conversation led to the same devastating conclusion. Rosa represented complete replacement, not just a temporary affair. The breaking point came on March 13th evening when Leena overheard Rosa talking to Carmen, the Filipino cook who worked for their neighbors. Standing in her own garden, Leena listened through the thin wall separating their properties as Rosa shared her most devastating news. The ultrasound had revealed the baby's gender. A boy, a healthy baby boy who would carry the Al-Mansouri name forward. Rosa's voice brightened with happiness as she described Rami's excitement, his talk of legacy and family continuation, his joy at finally having the son he had always wanted. Those words echoed in Leena's mind as she prepared dinner on March 14th, moving through the familiar motions of chopping vegetables and preparing rice while her world crumbled around her. When Rosa entered the kitchen to help with cleaning after the evening meal, Leena knew this would be their final conversation as employer and employee. The confrontation erupted with Leena demanding Rosa's immediate departure from Dubai. Rosa, believing pregnancy had secured her position, refused with casual defiance that brought Rami rushing from the sitting room. What followed was a three-way argument that stripped away 25 years of careful politeness and revealed the raw emotions underneath. Rami defended Rosa, spoke of handling the situation with dignity, of making proper arrangements for his unborn child. Rosa stood her ground, one hand protectively cradling her stomach, speaking of love and the future she envisioned. And Leena felt everything she had built, everything she had sacrificed, everything she had endured slipping away to a domestic worker who had been in their home for barely 3 months. The final trigger came when Rosa, emboldened by Rami's support and confident in her pregnancy's protective power, delivered the words that would seal her fate. She could give Rami the son he had always wanted, she declared with pride. Something Leena had failed to provide in 25 years of marriage. The kitchen knife lay on the cutting board where Leena had been preparing vegetables. In that moment, as Rosa's words hit their target with surgical precision, 25 years of inadequacy and shame crystallized into pure, murderous rage. The blade found its mark between Rosa's ribs with devastating accuracy. The young woman's gasp of surprise mixed with Rami's shout of horror as Rosa crumpled to the kitchen floor, her blood spreading across the white ceramic tiles like spilled wine. Rami dropped to his knees beside her motionless form, his hands pressing desperately against the wound, trying to stem the flow of blood that pulsed through his fingers. But Rosa Santos was already beyond help. Her eyes stared sightlessly at the kitchen ceiling as her life ebbed away on the floor where she had prepared countless meals for the family she had hoped to join. The son who would have carried the Al-Mansouri name died with her, taking Rami's dreams to the grave. As sirens wailed in response to Rami's frantic emergency call, Leena began the mantra that would define the rest of her life. The perfect facade she had spent 25 years building lay shattered on the kitchen floor, destroyed by a moment of rage that had taken less than 5 seconds but would haunt the Al-Mansouri family forever. The immediate aftermath of Rosa Santos' death unfolded with the choreographed precision of a family that understood the stakes of their deception. Within minutes of Rami's panicked emergency call at 8:47 p.m., the Al-Mansouri household transformed into a carefully orchestrated stage where every family member knew their role in the tragic performance about to begin. As ambulance sirens wailed through Al-Karama's quiet streets, Leena moved with surprising clarity for someone who had just committed murder. She placed the bloody kitchen knife in the sink among other dinner dishes, creating the impression of normal food preparation interrupted by accident. Rosa's body remained where it had fallen, but Leena quickly overturned a chair and scattered cooking utensils to suggest a struggle during meal cleanup rather than deliberate violence. When paramedics arrived, they found Rami cradling Rosa's lifeless form, his white shirt soaked crimson, sobbing what appeared to be genuine grief. Leena stood nearby in apparent shock, her hands trembling as she repeated the same words like a broken recording. She slipped. The knife was so sharp. It happened so fast. Such a terrible accident. Captain Ahmed Al-Suwaidi of the local police station arrived expecting a routine domestic accident investigation. A 15-year veteran of Dubai's police force, he had seen countless household mishaps involving kitchen knives, cleaning chemicals, and workplace injuries among the Emirates' vast domestic worker population. His initial assessment classified Rosa's death as low priority, tragic but straightforward, requiring basic documentation and minimal investigation. The family's story aligned perfectly across multiple tellings. Rosa had been cleaning dishes after dinner when she slipped on wet tiles, falling backward onto the cutting board where Leena had left a sharp knife after food preparation. The wound, while fatal, appeared consistent with an accidental impalement during a kitchen fall. Neighbors who arrived to offer support accepted this explanation without question, bringing flowers and condolences for what they assumed was a workplace tragedy. But forensic evidence tells stories that human witnesses cannot fabricate, and Rosa's body spoke a different truth than the one the Al-Mansouri family presented. Dr. Amina Hassan, Dubai Police's forensic medical examiner, noted discrepancies during her initial examination that transformed a routine accident investigation into something far more serious. The wound's angle suggested Rosa had been standing upright when attacked, not falling backward as claimed. Defensive scratches on her hands indicated she had tried to protect herself during a struggle, contradicting the sudden accident narrative. Most damning, blood spatter patterns across the kitchen walls showed trajectory inconsistent with an accidental fall but perfectly matching a deliberate forward thrust from someone Rosa's height. As forensic analysis progressed, Captain Al-Suwaidi's investigation expanded beyond basic accident documentation. Digital forensics revealed months of text messages between Rosa and Rami that painted a picture of romantic involvement far beyond employer-employee relations. Financial records showed Rami's recent cash withdrawals and jewelry purchases that never appeared as gifts for family members. The autopsy confirmed Rosa's pregnancy and revealed the fetus was male, information that transformed the investigation's entire context. The breakthrough came through Carmen Santos, Rosa's friend and confidant who worked as a cook for neighboring families. Initially reluctant to betray Rosa's secrets, Carmen's testimony under police pressure revealed the affair's timeline, Rosa's pregnancy announcement, and most crucially, her fear that Leena suspected their relationship. Carmen described Rosa's excitement about carrying Rami's son and her naive belief that motherhood would secure her position in the household. Meanwhile, cracks appeared in the Al-Mansouri family's united front as the investigation intensified. Maryam, the traditional eldest daughter, supported her parents publicly while privately wrestling with growing doubts about their version of events. Leila, with her modern university education, questioned inconsistencies in the accident story during family meetings. But it was Simi, the artistic youngest daughter, whose emotional devastation revealed the family's true trauma. Her tearful outbursts about "something terrible happening in our kitchen" suggested knowledge beyond what the official story contained. The Philippine Embassy's involvement elevated the case from local tragedy to international concern. Diplomatic pressure demanded thorough investigation of their citizens' death, while Filipino newspapers and worker rights organizations scrutinized the case for evidence of abuse or negligence. Social media campaigns using #JusticeForRosa gained momentum across Southeast Asia, drawing attention to domestic worker treatment throughout the Gulf region. Extended family meetings became exercises in damage control as relatives debated strategies for protecting the Al-Mansouri reputation. Some urged continued support for Leena's accident story, while others whispered that truth might emerge regardless of family loyalty. Legal fees mounted as they hired experienced criminal defense attorneys, and Rami's import business suffered as government contracts faced review due to the ongoing investigation. The final unraveling came when forensic specialists recreated the kitchen scene using advanced blood spatter analysis and wound trajectory calculations. Their reconstruction proved definitively that Rosa had been attacked while standing upright, facing her assailant, with defensive positioning indicating she knew violence was imminent. Security camera footage from a neighbor's villa, initially overlooked, showed no evidence supporting the accidental fall scenario. By early April 2016, Captain Al-Suwaidi possessed overwhelming evidence that Rosa Santos had been murdered during a domestic confrontation. The only remaining question was whether Leena Al-Mansouri would confess to the crime or force prosecutors to present their case in court, potentially exposing even more damaging details about the family's secret life behind closed doors. The perfect accident story that had briefly protected the Al-Mansouri family was about to collapse under the weight of forensic truth. April 18, 2016, dawned like any other spring morning in Karama, but for the Al-Mansouri family, it would mark the end of their month-long deception. Captain Ahmed Al-Suwaidi arrived at their villa during what should have been a peaceful family gathering, with Mariam and Leila visiting from their respective cities to support their parents through the ongoing investigation. Instead, they witnessed their mother being placed in handcuffs as formal charges were read: first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and filing false police reports. The confession came not in a dramatic courtroom moment, but in the sterile interrogation room of Dubai Police Headquarters after hours of sustained questioning. Leena's carefully constructed story crumbled piece by piece as forensic evidence contradicted every element of the accident narrative. When confronted with blood spatter analysis proving Rosa had been attacked while standing upright, facing her assailant, Leena's composure finally shattered. Through tears that seemed to emerge from 25 years of suppressed pain, she revealed everything. The discovery of the affair, overhearing Rosa's pregnancy announcement, the devastating revelation that the baby was the son she had never been able to provide. Her voice broke as she described the moment Rosa declared she could give Rami what Leena never could, and how that statement had triggered a rage so pure and consuming that it transformed a kitchen knife into a murder weapon. The trial that followed consumed 6 weeks of Dubai's attention, though media coverage remained respectfully limited compared to the international circus that similar cases might generate elsewhere. Judge Hassan al-Rashid presided over proceedings that balanced traditional cultural considerations with modern legal principles, creating a complex legal landscape where ancient concepts of honor and shame intersected with contemporary justice. Chief Prosecutor Fatima Al-Zahra built her case methodically, presenting forensic evidence that painted an undeniable picture of premeditated violence. Carmen Santos, Rosa's friend and confidant, provided heartbreaking testimony about Rosa's hopes and fears, her naive belief that pregnancy would secure her future, and her growing anxiety about Leena's suspicious behavior in the days before her death. The pregnancy revelation proved particularly devastating, not just the existence of the unborn child, but the confirmation that it was male, the heir Rami had longed for throughout his marriage. The defense strategy centered on cultural context and psychological breakdown. Leena's attorneys argued that 25 years of feeling inadequate as a wife, combined with traditional societal pressures about male heirs, had created a perfect storm of mental instability. Expert witnesses testified about the unique psychological pressures faced by women in traditional marriages, the shame associated with childlessness in patriarchal societies, and the devastating impact of watching another woman fulfill your primary role as a wife. Perhaps the most compelling moments came when the Al-Mansouri daughters testified on their mother's behalf. Maryam spoke of Leena's devotion to family, her years of volunteer work, her sacrifice in accepting Rami's previous indiscretions for the sake of family stability. Layla, torn between modern concepts of justice and traditional family loyalty, described the impossible position her mother faced when confronted with replacement by a domestic worker. But it was Simi's emotional breakdown on the witness stand that revealed the true cost of the family's tragedy, a young woman forced to choose between condemning her mother and honoring a murder victim. Rami's testimony proved most damaging to his wife's defense. Under oath, he admitted to the affair, confirmed Rosa's pregnancy, and reluctantly acknowledged that he had been planning a future that included both women, an arrangement that traditional society would never accept. His obvious grief for Rosa's death, combined with his continued love for Leena, painted a picture of a man destroyed by his own selfish desires. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict that attempted to balance justice with mercy. Leena was found guilty of manslaughter rather than first-degree murder, with additional convictions for evidence tampering and filing false reports. Judge Al-Rashid's reasoning acknowledged the extreme provocation she had endured while firmly condemning the violence that resulted. The sentence of 12 years imprisonment, with possibility of parole after 8 years, reflected both the severity of her crime and the cultural factors that had contributed to her psychological breakdown. The immediate aftermath saw Leena transferred to Al-Awar Women's Prison, where she would spend the next 8 years rebuilding her identity from convicted murderer to someone capable of redemption. Rami faced social ostracism but avoided divorce, choosing instead to focus on supporting his daughter's education and caring for his elderly mother. The family's reputation lay in ruins, but their bonds, though strained, remained unbroken. Rosa Santos' death catalyzed meaningful change in domestic worker protections throughout the UAE. Her name became synonymous with the need for better oversight of employer-employee relationships, enhanced legal protections for vulnerable workers, and increased awareness of the power dynamics that made such tragedies possible. 8 years later, Leena's early release marked not just personal redemption but a family's gradual healing from tragedy. The Al-Mansouri name would never fully recover its former standing, but their story became a cautionary tale about the dangerous intersection of traditional expectations, personal inadequacy, and unchecked jealousy. In the end, justice was served not through vengeance, but through understanding, recognizing that even terrible crimes can emerge from human pain, and that healing remains possible even after the most devastating betrayals.